It meant flying the massive colony ships directly to the play. The dying star of Lumina Prime began its final death throes 2 weeks ahead of all scientific predictions. Massive solar flares erupted from its surface, sending waves of deadly radiation across the planet. The crystal cities that had stood for millions of years started to crack and sing discordant songs of pain, as the stellar energy tore through their delicate structures. In the deep underground chambers, engineer Kim Sungmin worked desperately to keep the evacuation tunnels stable. His human engineering tools hummed alongside Valari crystal singers who shaped the living stone with their harmonics. Every few minutes, another tremor would shake the tunnels, threatening to bury millions of refugees. "The resonance is becoming chaotic," sang Harmony Keeper of Depths, one of the Valari engineers working with Sungmin's team. "The star's death song is drowning out our ability to sing the crystals into safety." Sungmin wiped sweat from his forehead as he recalibrated another structural support beam. "Then we'll have to hold them up the hard way. How many more evacuation groups are waiting down here?" "7 crystal chambers," the Valari replied, her harmonic voice trembling with exhaustion. "Nearly 2 million of our people shelter in the deep places." Above ground, the evacuation continued at a frantic pace. The massive colony ship New Hope had landed directly in Crystal City 1, its cargo bays converted into temporary Valari habitats. Captain Park Sujin coordinated the boarding operation from her ship's medical bay, watching thousands of crystalline beings flow into the evacuation vessels like living rivers of light. "Medical team to Bay 7, she announced over the ship's communication system. "We have injured Valari coming aboard. Dr. Seo Eunjung, your expertise is needed." Dr. Eunjung had become the fleet's leading expert on Valari physiology through weeks of emergency treatment. Her gentle touch and calm demeanor had earned the trust of the frightened refugees, who had never been treated by alien medics before. The young Valari she was treating now had been injured when part of his crystal home collapsed during a stellar flare. His arm was fractured, and the light that normally flowed through his crystalline body was flickering weakly. "Your healing harmonics are very soothing," the Valari sang softly as Eunjung worked to stabilize his injured limb. "Do all humans possess such gift songs?" "We call it compassion," Eunjung replied through her translation device. "And yes, most of us have it. That's why we're here." But even as the evacuation proceeded, the Thrakari fleet maintained its blockade. General Krex had received reinforcements from the Empire's home fleet, another 60 warships that brought his total force to over 100 vessels. His patience with the human rescue mission had completely run out. "Human Admiral," Krex's voice boomed across all communication frequencies, "you have violated Thrakari space, ignored our lawful orders, and interfered with the natural order of galactic evolution. Your ships will withdraw immediately, or we will destroy them all." Admiral Nam Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of Seoul's Pride, watching tactical displays that showed Thrakari ships moving into attack formation. Around the planet, human evacuation vessels were completely vulnerable, their shields down and cargo bays open to receive refugees. "General Krex," he replied, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. "We are conducting a humanitarian rescue operation. These people are innocent civilians facing extinction. Stand down your weapons and let us save them." "The weak deserve their fate," Krex responded. "The Thrakari Empire will not permit your species to interfere with galactic natural selection. You have 1 hour to begin withdrawal, or we open fire." In the fighter squadrons scattered throughout the human fleet, pilots like Lim Dong-yuk prepared for what they knew would be their final battle. His small fighter was no match for a Thrakari battlecruiser. But he and his squadron mates had volunteered to buy time for the evacuation ships. "Phoenix Squadron. This is Phoenix Leader," he transmitted to his pilots. "Remember, we're not here to win a war. We're here to give those evacuation ships every extra minute we can. Make every shot count." The hour passed quickly. Across the planet's surface, human and allied teams worked frantically to load more Valari onto the evacuation ships. They had managed to save 12 million so far, but 28 million remained on the dying world. When the deadline expired, General Krex kept his word. The Thrakari fleet opened fire with devastating precision, targeting the human military escorts while avoiding the civilian evacuation vessels. They wanted to disable the human fleet's ability to fight back, then force the evacuation ships to withdraw empty. The Battle of Lumina Prime began with a thunderous exchange of energy weapons that lit up the space around the planet. Human destroyers and cruisers, outnumbered 5-1, spread out to protect the vulnerable colony ships on the surface. Captain Park Soo-jin watched the battle from the Bridge of Persistence as energy beams flashed overhead. Her ship was still loading refugees, but she could see that the human escorts were being overwhelmed. Thrakari vessels were breaking through the defensive lines, heading directly for the evacuation ships. "All hands, prepare for emergency launch," she announced. "We're taking off with whoever we have aboard." But as she prepared to lift off, thousands more Valari streamed toward her ship from the Crystal Cities. They were running from their homes as the underground chambers collapsed, carrying their children and their few remaining possessions. How could she leave them behind? "Captain," called her navigation officer, Lieutenant Kim Hyun-soo. "Thrakari battlecruiser Thunder of War is on direct approach. ETA 4 minutes." Park Soo-jin looked at the tactical display, then at the crowds of refugees still boarding her ship. She made a decision that would be remembered for generations. "Mr. Kim, plot an intercept course for that battlecruiser." "Captain, you heard me. If they want to stop this evacuation, they'll have to go through us first." The research vessel Persistence was not built for combat. It was a scientific ship converted for medical work, with minimal weapons and shields. But as it lifted off from Lumina Prime and accelerated toward the massive Thrakari warship, it carried something more powerful than weapons: the absolute determination to protect innocent lives. Captain Park Soo-jin opened a channel to the entire human fleet. "This is Captain Park Soo-jin of the Persistence. They want to call this natural selection? Let me show them what human evolution looks like." Her ship struck the Thunder of War amidships at maximum velocity. The explosion could be seen from the planet's surface, a brilliant flash that temporarily outshone the dying star. The Thrakari battlecruiser was crippled, spinning out of control, while the Persistence was completely destroyed. But Captain Park's sacrifice had an unexpected effect. Across the human fleet, other ships began following her example. Cargo vessels rammed Thrakari destroyers. Medical ships used their landing craft as improvised missiles. Even the massive colony ships turned their bulk into weapons, using their reinforced hulls to crush smaller enemy vessels. The Thrakari had expected a conventional space battle, with both sides exchanging fire at long range until one fleet was defeated. They were not prepared for an enemy that treated every ship as expendable if it meant protecting the evacuation. Admiral Nam Hyun-woo watched his fleet sacrifice itself ship by ship and felt pride warring with grief in his chest. These were good people, volunteers who had left their homes and families to save strangers. Now they were dying to give those strangers a few more minutes of life. But just when the situation seemed hopeless, salvation came from an unexpected direction. Ships began arriving from across the galaxy, not just the Allied vessels that had joined the rescue convoy, but new arrivals drawn by news of the battle. The crystalline architects sent their most powerful warships, massive vessels of living crystal that could harmonize with Valari technology. A rebel faction of Nexus Syndicate ships arrived with heavy cruisers and battle platforms. Most surprisingly, several squadrons of young Thrakari officers arrived, their ships painted with human and Valari symbols. "This is Commander Thek of the Thrakari vessel Honor's Edge," came a transmission from one of the defecting ships. "We refuse to participate in this slaughter of innocents. The Empire does not speak for all Thrakari." For the first time in galactic history, a battle was being fought not between species or nations, but between two philosophies: those who believed in protecting the weak and those who thought only the strong deserved to survive. The arrival of reinforcements shifted the balance of the battle, but it also escalated the conflict. General Krex, facing mutiny in his own ranks and defeat by a coalition of lesser species, made a desperate decision. If he couldn't stop the evacuation by defeating the rescue fleet, he would destroy the planet itself. "All ships target the planet's surface," he ordered his remaining loyal vessels. "If we cannot prevent this contamination of galactic natural order, we will ensure it ends here." The Thrakari fleet began bombarding Lumina Prime directly, targeting the crystal cities where millions of Valari still waited for evacuation. The beautiful structures that had survived for millions of years began to collapse under the assault, their harmonic songs becoming screams of destruction. In the deep tunnels, engineer Kim Sung-min felt the bombardment through the planet's crust. The Thrakari energy weapons were causing massive The surface of Lumina Prime shook violently as another massive quake tore through the crystal cities. Deep underground, in the ancient refuge chambers carved from living stone, millions of Valari huddled together and sang songs of fear and hope. Their harmonies echoed through the tunnels, creating a symphony of survival that had never been heard before. Dawn pressed her crystalline hands against the chamber wall, feeling the vibrations of the dying planet through her entire body. Above them, she knew the human ships had arrived, but the Thrakari fleet blocked any chance of rescue. Time was running out faster than anyone had predicted. Bei Taeyong had never managed an evacuation before, but he was learning quickly. As emergency rescue coordinator for the human fleet, his job was to organize the most complex rescue operation in galactic history. He stood in the command center of the colony ship New Hope, surrounded by displays showing the planet's deteriorating condition. "The seismic activity is increasing," reported Dr. Young Soo-young, the fleet's atmospheric systems specialist. "The planet's crust is becoming unstable. Some of the deeper refuge chambers are already collapsing." Taeyong studied the maps of Valari cities, trying to calculate how many ships they would need for each location. The numbers were terrifying. Even if they could get past the Thrakari blockade, they had only 8 weeks to evacuate 40 million people from a planet that was tearing itself apart. "What about the crystal caves near the southern pole?" he asked. "Cut off by lava flows 3 days ago," Jung Soo-young replied. "We estimate 2 million Valari are trapped there with no surface access." The rescue coordinator felt the weight of impossible decisions. Every choice meant saving some people while abandoning others. He had never imagined that saving lives could be so brutal. On the Bridge of Soul's Pride, Admiral Nam Hyunwoo faced his own impossible situation. The Thrakari fleet had positioned itself in a perfect defensive formation around Lumina Prime. Any attempt to reach the planet would result in a devastating battle that the human fleet couldn't win. "General," Krex's latest message was playing on repeat. "Human Commander, you have exactly 1 hour to withdraw from this system. After that, any vessel approaching the planet will be destroyed. The Thrakari Empire will not allow this illegal intervention to continue." "Admiral," called Communications Officer Han Min-seok, "I'm receiving harmonic transmissions from the planet's surface. The Valari are trying to contact us directly." The bridge speakers filled with crystalline music unlike anything the humans had ever heard. Han Min-seok had spent months learning Valari harmonic language, and his translation device converted the alien songs into words the crew could understand. "Human ships, we sing gratitude for your arrival. But we understand if you must leave, we do not wish you to die for our sake. Your attempt alone honors us." The message hit every person on the bridge like a physical blow. Here were 40 million people facing extinction, and they were worried about their rescuers' safety. Admiral Nam Hyunwoo felt something harden in his chest, a determination that went beyond military duty. "Mr. Han," he said quietly, "send a message back. Tell them we didn't come this far to leave empty-handed." The human fleet began moving toward the planet, spreading out into evacuation formation despite the Thrakari blockade. The civilian ships stayed in the center while the military escorts formed a protective screen around them. Every captain knew they were probably flying to their deaths, but none of them suggested retreat. Dr. Jung Soo-young worked frantically to coordinate with Valari engineers on the surface. The rescue operation required perfect timing and cooperation between completely different technologies. Human atmospheric processors had to synchronize with Valari crystal singing to create safe boarding environments. "The crystal cities are resonating at dangerous frequencies," she reported to Bei Taeyong. "The dying star is affecting the planetary harmonics. If we don't stabilize the evacuation zones, the boarding process could kill the Valari we're trying to save." Taeyong made another impossible decision. "Redirect atmospheric teams to the most unstable areas first. We save who we can, where we can." The first evacuation shuttles launched from the human fleet, racing toward the planet's surface. They carried teams of engineers and medics who would set up emergency evacuation points in the crystal cities. It was dangerous work. The planet's surface was being bombarded by increasingly violent solar flares from the dying star. Captain Yoon Jae-hyun piloted one of the lead shuttles, his small craft loaded with emergency atmospheric equipment. Behind him sat a mixed team of humans and friendly aliens, all volunteers for the most dangerous part of the mission, Shuttle Dawn's light to Fleet Command, he reported as they entered the planet's atmosphere, beginning descent to Crystal City 7. Visibility is poor due to stellar radiation, but we're still on course. The city appeared through the swirling dust and energy storms, a magnificent structure of living crystal that sang even as it slowly cracked apart. Massive spires reached toward the sky, connected by bridges of pure light that flickered and sparked with the planet's death throes. Jae-hyun set his shuttle down in the city's central plaza, where thousands of Valari waited in perfect harmonic formation. Their songs rose into the toxic air, creating a dome of organized sound that provided some protection from the stellar radiation. The evacuation team worked quickly to set up atmospheric processors that could create safe zones for human-Valari interaction. The Valari had never seen humans up close before, and their initial fear was obvious in the discordant notes that crept into their harmonies. But when the first human medic, Dr. Seo Eun-jung, successfully treated a young Valari injured by falling crystal debris, the fear began to change into something else. The Valari had spent their entire history believing they were too different from other species to form meaningful connections. These strange, soft-bodied creatures proved them wrong. "Your healing songs are different from ours," Dawn observed as she watched Dr. Eun-jung work. "But they carry the same intent." "Music is universal," Eun-jung replied through her translation device. "Whether it's made with voices or medical scanners." Above the planet, the standoff continued. The Thrakari fleet maintained their blockade, while more human shuttles launched toward the surface. General Krex was growing impatient with the humans' refusal to withdraw, but his orders were specific. Don't fire unless the humans directly challenge the blockade. The rescue operation created a strange stalemate. Human ships could reach the planet's surface through gaps in the Thrakari formation, but any large-scale evacuation would require bringing the colony ships much closer to Lumina Prime. That would force a direct confrontation. Engineer Kim Sung-min found himself in one of the most dangerous positions of the entire operation. His team was working in the deep crystal mines where millions of Valari had taken shelter from the surface storms. The tunnels were incredibly beautiful but terrifyingly unstable. "The resonance patterns are all wrong," he reported to the surface teams. "The stellar radiation is causing harmonic interference. The tunnel walls could collapse at any moment." Working with Valari crystal singers, Sung-min's team tried to stabilize the underground chambers long enough for evacuation. It required a perfect blend of human engineering and Valari harmonic technology. The humans provided structural supports while the Valari sang the crystals into stable configurations. But time was their enemy. Every hour brought new collapses, new groups of Valari cut off from evacuation points. Sung-min watched his team work with desperate efficiency, knowing that each tunnel they stabilized might be the difference between life and death for thousands of people. Communications. Officer Han Min-seok had become the primary liaison between the human fleet and the Valari population. His mastery of harmonic language allowed him to coordinate between dozens of evacuation sites simultaneously. He listened to the crystal cities singing their desperate songs and translated them into tactical information for the rescue teams. Crystal City 3 reports successful atmospheric integration, he announced to the Fleet Command Center. "They're ready to begin boarding operations." "Crystal City 12 has lost contact," came another report. "Seismic activity has cut off their communication spires." Each update brought good news and bad news in equal measure. The evacuation was proceeding, but not fast enough. At their current rate, they could save perhaps 10 million Valari before the star exploded. That left 30 million facing certain death. Dr. Jung Soo-young worked around the clock to improve the evacuation process. She had designed atmospheric systems that could support both humans and Valari, but the boarding procedures were still slow and dangerous. Each Valari had to be carefully transported from their crystal environment to the ship's artificial atmosphere without shock or injury. "What if we don't transport them?" she suddenly asked Bae Tae-young during one of their planning sessions. "What do you mean? What if we bring their environment with us? Instead of making the Valari adapt to our ships, we make our ships adapt to them." It was a radical idea. Instead of individual evacuation, they could transport entire crystal chambers with their populations intact. It would require massive engineering modifications to the colony ships, but it might allow them to save far more Valari in much less time. The plan was brilliant, but dangerous. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Humanity would not do nothing. They were the human fleet launched from Luna Station on a cold Tuesday morning. Admiral Nam Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Soul's Pride, watching 200 ships spread out across space like a constellation of hope. Each vessel carried specialized equipment, supplies, and crew members who had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. The journey to Valari space would take 8 months through the most dangerous part of the galaxy. No major shipping routes passed through that region, and pirates often used the empty systems as hiding places. Worse, the route passed close to Thrakari military zones, where human ships would not be welcome. Captain Park Soo-jin commanded the Persistence, a research vessel converted into a mobile hospital. Her medical bay was equipped to treat both human and Valari injuries, though they had never actually worked on a living Valari before. Everything they knew came from medical scans and theoretical studies. "Captain," called her communications officer, "Ensign Oh Minwoo, we're receiving a transmission from Lumina Prime." The main screen flickered, showing the crystal chamber where Wisdom Keeper of Memory waited. The old Valari's harmonic voice filled the bridge, translated by their newest piece of technology, a communication device built by Dr. Shin Minji, Earth's first expert in Valari language, human vessels, the Valari elder sang. "We did not expect, we did not dare hope. How can we thank you for this gift?" Park Soo-jin smiled, even though she knew he probably couldn't interpret human facial expressions. "We're not there yet, Wisdom Keeper, but we're coming. Tell your people to prepare for evacuation." The first weeks of the journey passed without major problems. The fleet made good time and the crews settled into their routines. But as they entered the lawless regions between civilized space, trouble began to find them. Yoon Jae-hyun piloted the scout ship Dawn's Light, one of the fastest vessels in the human fleet. His job was to scout ahead for dangers and report back to Admiral Nam Hyunwoo. He had been a fighter pilot during the border wars and knew how to handle himself in dangerous situations. "Admiral," he reported over the communication system, "I'm detecting multiple ships moving to intercept our route. Configuration suggests pirate vessels." The pirates had been watching the human fleet for days, waiting for the right moment to attack. They saw a convoy of civilian ships with minimal military escort, easy prey for a quick raid. What they didn't understand was that these particular humans were not going to run from a fight. Commander Oh Seung-woo coordinated the defense from his battlecruiser, the Incheon's Hammer. He had only 20 military vessels to protect nearly 200 civilian ships, but his crews were highly motivated. They knew that any ship lost to pirates meant fewer Valari would be saved. The pirate attack came at dawn, ship time. 30 raider vessels dropped out of hyperspace and charged toward the human convoy, weapons blazing. Their leader, a notorious criminal called Red Claw, expected the humans to surrender immediately and offer tribute for safe passage. Instead, the human escorts moved to intercept while the civilian ships formed a protective formation. The converted cargo vessels deployed shields and returned fire with their improvised weapon systems. Even the hospital ships launched fighter squadrons to defend the convoy. The battle was fierce but brief. Human tactics focused on protecting the evacuation ships rather than destroying enemies. They used their mobility to outmaneuver the heavier pirate vessels, striking quickly and then retreating before the raiders could respond effectively. Red Claw's flagship, the Blood Hunter, found itself surrounded by 5 human ships. Instead of continuing the fight, the pirate leader opened a communication channel. "Human Commander," Red Claw's gravelly voice came over the speakers. "What cargo do you carry that's worth dying for?" Commander Oh Seung-woo's response was broadcast across all frequencies. "We carry hope, pirate, and we're not dying today." The pirates retreated, confused and frustrated. They had never encountered prey that fought back so fiercely while protecting others. Word spread quickly through the criminal networks. The human convoy was too dangerous to attack. But the pirates were not their biggest problem. 3 weeks later, Yoon Jae-hyun detected a massive fleet moving to intercept them. The ships bore the black and red markings of the Thrakari Empire. Admiral Nam Hyunwoo studied the tactical display with growing concern. 40 Thrakari warships had positioned themselves directly in the path to Valari space. The Thrakari commander, General Krex, opened a communication channel. "Human vessels," Krex's voice boomed across space. "You are approaching restricted military zones. Turn back immediately or face the consequences. Nam Hyunwoo had been expecting this confrontation. The Thrakari Empire had opposed the rescue mission from the beginning, and they wouldn't let the human fleet pass without a fight. But he had prepared for this moment. "General Krex," he replied calmly. "We are on a humanitarian mission to save innocent lives. We have no military objectives in your territory. The Valari are not your concern, human. Your species lacks the wisdom to understand galactic realities. Return to your small corner of space before you cause more trouble." The two fleets faced each other across the void, weapons ready but not yet firing. The human ships were outnumbered 2-1, and the Thrakari vessels were more heavily armed. In a straight fight, the humans would lose badly. But Nam Hyunwoo had one advantage the Thrakari didn't expect. While the main fleet negotiated, Dr. Shin Minji had been working with a small team to establish communication with other species in the region. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The chorus was a hive mind species that most other civilizations ignored. They were peaceful traders who traveled in small, unimpressive ships. But they had been listening to the human communications about the Valari rescue mission, and their collective consciousness was deeply moved by humanity's determination to save strangers. "Human Admiral," came a new voice over the communication system. "This is Prime Voice of the Chorus. We offer our assistance in your noble mission." Suddenly, 50 small chorus vessels materialized around the human fleet. They weren't warships, but their presence changed the tactical situation. The Thrakari would have to attack not just humans, but also the chorus, which would bring the Trade Federation into the conflict. More ships began arriving. The crystalline architects, who had remained neutral in galactic politics for centuries, sent a squadron of their living crystal ships. A group of rogue Nexus Syndicate vessels, their crews disgusted by their leadership's refusal to help the Valari, joined the growing fleet. General Krex found himself facing not just the human convoy, but a coalition of species united by a common cause. His military training told him to attack immediately before more ships arrived, but his political instincts warned him that attacking such a diverse group would have serious consequences for the Thrakari Empire. "You are making a mistake, humans," Krex transmitted. "The Valari are doomed regardless of your actions. You will only succeed in getting yourselves killed." "Maybe," Nam Hyunwoo replied, "but we'd rather die trying to save lives than live knowing we did nothing." For several tense hours, the two fleets remained locked in standoff. Then, unexpectedly, the Thrakari ships began to withdraw. General Krex had received new orders from his superiors. The Thrakari Empire couldn't afford to start a war with multiple species over what they considered a lost cause. "This is not over, human," Krex's final message warned. "When you reach Valari space, you will find no welcome there." The human fleet continued its journey, now accompanied by ships from a dozen different species. The rescue mission had become something larger than anyone had expected, a symbol of cooperation and hope in a galaxy that had grown cynical and selfish. Dr. Shin Minji worked tirelessly to coordinate between the different species. Her communication protocols allowed humans, chorus, architects, and others to share information and tactical data. For the first time in galactic history, such a diverse group was working together toward a common goal. As they approached Valari space, the fleet received regular updates from Lumina Prime. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The dying star was throwing off massive solar flares that were already damaging the planet's surface. Millions of Valari had taken shelter in deep crystal caves, but those refugees wouldn't protect them from the final explosion. Dawn had become the unofficial liaison between the Valari and the approaching rescue fleet. Her ability to sing in harmonics that humans could actually hear made her invaluable as a translator. She worked with Shin Minji to prepare her people for evacuation procedures they had never needed before. "The ship songs you send us are beautiful," Dawn transmitted to the human fleet, "but we do not understand how to board your vessels. Our bodies are not like yours." Park Sujin spent hours working with Valari engineers to design boarding procedures that wouldn't harm the crystalline beings. Every detail had to be considered: air pressure, gravity, temperature, even the frequency of light that the ship's systems produced. The final weeks of the journey passed in intensive preparation. Human engineers modified their ships based on information from the Valari. Medical teams trained on crystalline biology using advanced simulations. Pilots practiced emergency evac. The news reached Earth 3 days later, spreading across every communication network like wildfire. In Seoul, people gathered in the streets to watch the broadcasts on giant screens. In New York, the stock market stopped trading as everyone focused on the unfolding story. In Lagos, children asked their parents why the pretty crystal people had to die. President Lee Min-ho sat in his office, reading the same report for the 10th time. The numbers were devastating. 40 million Volari needed evacuation in 18 months. Each Volari required special atmospheric conditions that no existing ship could provide. The cost would bankrupt Earth's treasury 3 times over. His advisors filled the room, their faces grim. Defense Secretary Park Jin-woo shook his head slowly. "Mr. President, we simply don't have the ships. Our entire fleet consists of 200 vessels, and most of those are small patrol craft. We'd need at least 500 specialized evacuation ships. The economic impact would be catastrophic," added Treasury Secretary Kim So-hee. "We're still recovering from the Mars colony disaster. If we spend everything on this mission, we won't be able to defend our own worlds." Lee Min-ho listened to their arguments, but his mind kept returning to the images from the council meeting. He had watched Kim Dae-ho cast humanity's lone vote. Standing alone against the entire galaxy, the young ambassador had done the right thing, but now Earth faced an impossible choice. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His secretary entered quietly. "Mr. President, there are people gathering outside. They want to speak with you." Lee Min-ho walked to his window and looked down at the plaza below. Hundreds of people stood there holding signs and banners. But they weren't protesting, they were volunteering. Signs read, "Engineers for the Volari," and "We stand with the Crystal People and count us in." Similar scenes were happening across Earth. In Tokyo, the entire shipbuilding union had voted to work for free on any rescue mission. In Stockholm, scientists were already designing new atmospheric processors. In Cairo, pilots lined up to volunteer for what everyone knew would be an extremely dangerous mission. Dr. Cho Yuna received the call at 3 in the morning. As Earth's leading expert on alien atmospheric systems, she had been expecting it. President Lee Min-ho's voice was tired but determined. "Dr. Cho, I need to know if it's possible. Can we build ships that can keep the Volari alive during evacuation?" Yuna had been working on the problem since the news broke. Her team at the Seoul Institute of Technology had been running simulations non-stop. "It's possible, Mr. President, but incredibly difficult. Volari need a crystalline dust in their atmosphere that's only found on their homeworld. We'd have to synthesize it artificially. How long would that take? 6 months to develop the process. Another 6 months to produce enough for the evacuation fleet. We'd be cutting it very close." The president was quiet for a moment. "What do you need?" "Every atmospheric engineer on Earth, unlimited funding, and a miracle. You'll have the first 2. The miracle will have to come from somewhere else." Admiral Nam Hyun-woo had commanded Earth's defense fleet for 15 years. He had fought space pirates, negotiated with hostile aliens, and survived 3 major battles. But he had never faced anything like this. His staff officers filled the briefing room, their faces showing a mixture of determination and worry. Captain Park Soo-jin of the research vessel Persistence spoke first. "Admiral, we've completed the initial assessment. To evacuate 40 million Volari, we'll need every ship in the fleet plus at least 300 more." "Where do we get 300 ships?" asked Commander Lee Dong-wook. "We build them," Nam Hyun-woo replied simply. "Every shipyard on Earth is being converted to evacuation ship production. We're also retrofitting cargo vessels, passenger liners, even old mining ships, anything that can carry people through space." The engineering challenges were enormous. Volari physiology was completely different from human. They needed lower gravity, specific atmospheric composition, and their crystalline bodies were fragile. Standard human ships would kill them within hours, but humanity had advantages that other species lacked. They adapted quickly, learned from others, and worked together when faced with a common goal. Teams of engineers collaborated across continents, sharing designs and improvements in real time. Factory workers pulled double shifts without being asked. Even children contributed, collecting raw materials for recycling into ship components. Kang Ji-won had studied alien biology for 20 years, but she had never seen anything as beautiful as Volari physiology. Their bodies were living crystal matrices that processed energy directly from light and sound. They were incredibly efficient, needing very little food or water, but they were also extremely vulnerable to environmental changes. The good news, she explained to the medical team, is that Valari are very resilient once their basic needs are met. The bad news is that getting those needs wrong, even slightly, will kill them quickly. The team worked around the clock to design life support systems that could keep both humans and Valari alive during the journey. They had to account for everything from air pressure to the specific frequency of light that Valari needed for nutrition. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts continued on other fronts. Ambassador Kim Dae-ho worked tirelessly to convince other species to help, but the responses were always the same. The Thrakari Empire declared any human ships in Valari space would be considered unauthorized military vessels. The Nexus Syndicate began spreading rumors that humans planned to enslave the Valari as cheap labor. The worst blow came when several human colonies expressed concern about the mission. The governor of Alpha Centauri sent a formal protest, arguing that Earth was abandoning its own people to save aliens. Some corporate leaders threatened to withdraw support for Earth's government if the mission proceeded. President Lee Min-ho called a special session of the World Assembly. Representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva to debate humanity's response. The arguments were fierce and emotional. "We're talking about bankrupting our entire civilization," argued Representative Chen Wei from the Pacific Federation. "What happens to human colonies if we spend everything on this rescue mission? What happens to our souls if we don't?" replied Representative Maria Santos from the South American Union. "We have a chance to save 40 million innocent people. How can we call ourselves civilized if we turn away?" The debate continued for hours. Some speakers focused on practical concerns, resources, defense, economic stability. Others spoke about moral duty, human values, and what kind of species humanity wanted to be. Finally, President Lee Min-ho took the podium. The Great Hall fell silent as he began to speak. "My fellow humans," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of Earth through the broadcast networks. "We face a choice that will define us for generations. We can be practical, safe, and small. We can protect what we have and let others face their fate alone. Or we can be the species that stands up when others sit down, that reaches out when others turn away." He paused, looking out at the assembly. The Valari have never hurt anyone. They've lived in peace for millions of years, creating beauty and knowledge. They ask for nothing but a chance to continue existing. If we abandon them now, what does that make us? The vote was closer than expected, but it passed. 187 nations in favor, 23 against, 12 abstaining. Earth would mount the largest rescue operation in galactic history. As the assembly ended, messages of support poured in from across human space. The Mars colony pledged their entire mineral production for ship construction. The Asteroid Miners Union donated their entire fleet of cargo vessels. Even the distant research stations at the galaxy's edge sent what supplies they could. In shipyards across the solar system, the sounds of construction echoed day and night. Sparks flew as welders worked to retrofit civilian vessels with military-grade shields and Valari life support systems. Engineers tested and retested every component, knowing that lives depended on their work. Dr. Cho Yuna stood in her laboratory, watching the first batch of synthetic crystalline atmosphere being produced. It had taken 4 months of non-stop work, but they had done it. The artificial atmosphere was identical to what the Valari breathed on their homeworld. "Will it work?" asked her assistant, Dr. Kim Hyun-bin. "It has to work," Yuna replied. "We're running out of time." Admiral Nam Hyun-woo reviewed the final fleet composition from his command ship. 200 ships of every size and description, all modified for the rescue mission, massive colony ships that could carry thousands of Valari, fast courier vessels for emergency evacuations, military escorts to protect the convoy from pirates and hostile aliens. It wasn't enough. Even with every ship they could build or convert, they could only carry half the Valari population. But it was a start, and humanity had always believed that something was better than nothing. The fleet would launch in 2 weeks, beginning an 8-month journey to Valari space. They would arrive with only 6 months before the star exploded. 6 months to evacuate 40 million people while facing opposition from the most powerful military in the galaxy. As Nam Hyun-woo looked at his mixed fleet of warships and converted cargo haulers, he wondered if they were heroes or fools. But then he remembered the words of an ancient human philosopher. The great crystal city of Lumina Prime sang its morning song as Dawn stepped onto the observation platform. Her crystalline body caught the light from their dying star and scattered it into rainbow patterns across the walls. Like all Villari, she could speak through harmonic frequencies that made the air itself vibrate with meaning. But today, her song was filled with worry. The star that had given life to her people for millions of years was growing larger and brighter each day. Soon, very soon, it would explode and destroy everything they had ever known. The Villari had built their civilization in harmony with their world, growing cities from living crystal that sang with the planet's own voice. Now all of it would be lost. The council meeting begins today. Her father, Wisdom Keeper of Memory, sang to her in low, sad tones. Perhaps the other species will help us. Dawn wanted to believe him, but she had heard the whispers from the few Villari who traveled to other worlds. The galaxy was not kind to those who were different. The Villari needed special air to breathe and specific gravity to live. Their bodies were made of living crystal that could break easily in the wrong environment. They were not like the other species who could adapt and survive anywhere. Far across the galaxy, in the great council chamber on Nexus Station, Kim Dae-ho sat alone at the human delegation table. Around him, hundreds of representatives from dozens of species filled the massive hall. The Thrakari delegation took up an entire section with their tall, armored bodies and weapons that gleamed in the artificial light. The Nexus Syndicate representatives wore expensive clothes and constantly checked their profit calculations on small devices. The mysterious ethereal collective floated in their containment suits, barely visible through the swirling mists. Dae-ho was the only human representative. Earth was still new to galactic politics, having joined the Council only 50 years ago. Most of the other species saw humans as young and naive, not worth listening to, but Dae-ho had studied every species in the galaxy, learned their languages and customs. He believed that understanding each other was the key to peace. The council leader, a massive Thrakari general named Warlord Vex, called the session to order. His voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. "We gather today to discuss the Villari situation," Vex announced. "Their star will explode in 18 months. They request assistance for evacuation." A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing Lumina Prime and its dying star. Beautiful crystal cities covered the planet's surface, connected by bridges of living light. Dae-ho had visited there once and had been amazed by the Villari's peaceful civilization. The Nexus Syndicate representative, a thin creature called Prophet Seeker Crix, stood up first. "The cost of evacuation would be enormous," Crix said in a voice like grinding metal. "Special ships, special environments, special everything. The Villari cannot pay for such services. They have no valuable resources to trade." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The ethereal collective representative spoke next, their voice echoing strangely from their containment suit. "The Villari chose to develop their civilization in isolation. They did not build relationships with other species. Why should we bear the cost of their choices?" Dae-ho felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Around the chamber, other representatives nodded and spoke about economic realities and resource allocation. They talked about the Villari like they were discussing the weather, not the lives of 40 million sentient beings. "The Thrakari Empire has consulted our military advisors," Warlord Vex said. "Evacuation of the entire Villari population would require resources equivalent to building a new fleet. Such ships would be useful for only this one mission, then become worthless. It is not practical." More voices joined in, all saying the same thing in different ways. The Villari were too different, too expensive to save, too much trouble. The galaxy had limited resources, and they needed to be used efficiently. Some species were simply more valuable than others. Finally, the council leader called for testimony from the Villari themselves. A hologram flickered to life, showing Wisdom Keeper of Memory standing in his crystal chamber on Lumina Prime. His ancient form was beautiful and alien, like a sculpture made of living starlight. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he sang. His voice translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "We do not ask for charity. We offer our knowledge, our art, our songs. We have studied the music of the spheres for millions of years. We know secrets of crystal technology that could benefit all species. We ask only for a chance to continue existing." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then Prophet Seeker Crix laughed, a harsh sound that made everyone uncomfortable. "Songs and crystals? What use are those? Can they power our ships?" Can they feed our people? Can they defend our borders? Other representatives began talking loudly, dismissing the Valari's offer. Deho watched in horror as they reduced an entire civilization to numbers on their accounting sheets. The Valari had created beauty beyond imagination, had lived in peace for longer than any other species, had never hurt anyone, but because they could not offer military technology or valuable trade goods, they were worthless. Warlord Vex called for order. The Council will now vote on Resolution 2847, Emergency Evacuation Assistance for the Valari species. The voting began immediately. Species after species voted no with barely a moment's thought. The Thrakari voted no because it would cost too much. The Nexus Syndicate voted no because there was no profit in it. The Ethereal Collective voted no because the Valari had chosen their path. Even species that Deho thought might be sympathetic voted no, claiming they lacked the resources to help. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Deho stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the chamber. He thought about Dawn and her father, about the crystal cities singing their last songs, about 40 million people facing death while the galaxy turned away. The human delegation votes yes, he said clearly. Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber. Warlord Vex looked at him with something like pity. Human representative, you understand that your species lacks the resources to mount such an operation alone? Yes, Deho replied. But that doesn't change what's right. The final vote was announced 847 species voting no, 1 species voting yes. The resolution failed completely. Warlord Vex banged his ceremonial hammer. The Council has spoken. The Valari situation is classified as a natural disaster, beyond our scope of assistance. No Council resources will be allocated to evacuation efforts. As the chamber began to empty, Deho remained in his seat, staring at the hologram of Lumina Prime. He thought about sending a message to Dawn, to tell her that help was coming. But what help could humanity provide? Earth had a small fleet, limited resources, and no experience with such a massive operation. Still, as he finally stood to leave, Kim Deho made a silent promise. The galaxy might abandon the Valari, but humanity would not. Somehow, some way, they would find a way to stand with those who had been left to die.